Deepening political crisis in South Korea. 2 presidents impeached within 2 weeks with their stand-in replacement immediately under pressure. The instability is creating serious concern internationally. So what's gone wrong and what's next? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. South Korea is in deep political turmoil, one of the world's newest but most robust democracies, rocked in ways not seen since military dictatorship ended in the 1980s. 2 presidents ousted in December, with their acting replacement under pressure over the appointment of judges who'll decide the fate of the other 2. Yes, it's a complicated story, but with straightforward implications. Trouble in a key ally couldn't come at a worse time for the West, as tensions soar with neighbouring North Korea, China and Russia. Chaos in one of the world's biggest economies, and tech producers have sent investors fleeing and the currency tumbling, just as Donald Trump lurks around the corner threatening tariffs. So is this just a domestic political row that will eventually blow over, or is a key US ally significantly weakened in an area of vital importance? We'll discuss all of this with our guests in just a moment, but first this report from Victoria Gatenby.
South Korea's constitutional crisis has deepened after opposition parties in the National Assembly voted to impeach acting President Han Duck-soo. He replaced President Yoon just 2 weeks ago after Yoon was impeached for imposing martial law at the start of December before Parliament overturned it within a day. At least 6 judges on the Constitutional Court must uphold Yoon's impeachment to remove him from office. It currently only has 6, which means they'd need to deliver a unanimous ruling to strip Yoon of the presidency. Han has refused to appoint 3 more judges to the court unless there's cross-party agreement. So the main opposition Democratic Party that controls the chamber has suspended him, to the relief of supporters.
We don't know when there will be a second martial law declaration, and we just want this instability to end. The head of the rebellion, Yoon, must step down and be arrested immediately so we can usher in a new administration.
But those who support Yoon and Han say a second impeachment in as many weeks plunges the country into more chaos.
This demonstrates the Democratic Party's legislative tyranny. I oppose this illegal impeachment. It's the opposition's way of saying, stop working and just comply with our demands. It's unjust.
Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok has replaced Han as acting president. He says political uncertainty is threatening South Korea's national security.
What we have been worried about has become a reality. It's an unprecedented emergency situation in the Constitution's history. I urge you to maintain a defensive posture against North Korean provocations and propaganda.
South Korea is Asia's 4th largest economy. On Friday, its currency plunged to levels not seen since the 2007 global financial crisis. The Constitutional Court has up to 6 months to decide whether to reinstate or remove Yoon. Han says he'll also wait for a ruling from the court. With politics becoming more polarised, South Korea's democracy is being put to the test, and it's likely to face many more months of instability. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Well, let's bring in our experts to discuss all of this today. And we're joined today by Youngshik Bong, Research Fellow at Yonsei University Institute of North Korean Studies in Seoul. From Boston, Jeeyang Baum is Adjunct Fellow in Public Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. And also from Seoul, Chun is a retired South Korean Army Lieutenant General. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. If I can start with you, General Chun. The period of martial law went from the December the 3rd, December the 4th for just 6 hours, yet it seems the crisis is far from over.
Yes, so the military involvement portion ended within 6 hours. Unfortunately, the political aftermath still continues. And I think your report put in a pretty good summary of where we are right now. The next question is when the actual impeachment process involving President Yoon will start, and how the composition of the constitutional courts will be formed, whether we will have 3 new judges or not. So those are the main issues. As a citizen, I'm very disappointed that this whole political situation that we have is not being resolved politically.
General Chun, just staying with that period of martial law before we move on, yes, it was only 6 hours, but as a former military man and a very senior military man, what did you make of those scenes?
It was very startling to me, because the reason that Korea has a system which involves martial law is because of the serious threat that we have from North Korea. If there is a North Korean involved contingency, we must maintain law and order in a very chaotic situation. That is why we have a system called martial law, which ensures or limits constitutional human rights, thereby maintaining law and order, which will support mobilization, which in turn will support the operational plan to defend Korea. In this case, none of that seemed to be present for the calling of martial law, and yet it happened. So it was quite startling. But on the other hand, the soldiers who were ordered to conduct these actions knew that something was not right, and they hesitated, which gave time for the constitutional process to conclude and dismiss the martial law at the parliament level.
Staying in style, Youngshik, this was at the beginning of the month. Some weeks have now passed. Do we now have any indication what the real motives were of President Yoon? Why did he do this? What was he thinking? Is it any clearer now?
Well, according to his lawyer's statements, President Yoon Suk-yeol only had a very mild and specific purpose behind his decision to declare the martial law for the first time since 1979. So it has been 45 years since Korean citizens actually experienced the thing called the martial law. According to his lawyer's explanation, he only wanted to give a stern warning to the opposition parties that tried to impeach the cabinet members for wrong reasons for more than 22 times. And he wanted to verify the allegation of the election fraud for the last National Assembly election in the month of April. But the explanation rendered by his lawyers and himself do not really sit well with the majority of the Korean citizens, because this is so overblown to justify the declaration of martial law for the first time in 45 years to deal with these political matters. Other measures would have been more than enough compared to the damages made by the declaration of martial law.
Well, let's look at what could happen next and the possible scenarios. I say possible scenarios because it's not really very clear-cut what happens next, Jeeyang. Let's start with President Yoon. I mean, he's been impeached, but potentially he could come back, couldn't he? Do you think there's any chance of him coming back and having any real power? Because even in the unlikely scenario that he won in the Constitutional Court, he would have no political power at all, would he?
So I think it's a story that can go a couple of directions at a minimum. One is sort of the impeachment process, as you just pose, which is, we'll have to see if the next sort of appointments of the 3 vacant justices do in fact pass, and there's a consensus, which is also the reason that the former acting president Han said was the reason why he did not approve. But so that I think is more likely the scenario. But on the other hand, President Yoon has a sort of an all-star team put together on his legal defense, moving forward. And that's a bit of an uncertain factor, is he is, by training, a career prosecutor who knows the Constitution and kind of has the legal expertise to bring in some of the potential arguments in the procedure. So I think it's one of sort of, buying time, doing everything possible to build a case that there was an actual threat in his mind. But on the other hand, there's also the criminal investigations that are sort of ongoing in different paths. So we can talk about that too as well. So a bit of an uncertainty there.
General Chun, I mean, we've now had two presidents, a president and acting president, who've been impeached. We now have the finance minister as the acting president, Choi Sang-mok. Is there a possibility that if he doesn't come up with these extra judges for the Constitutional Court, he could be impeached too? And where does this leave us? Do they go on and on down a political pecking order?
Yes, that's exactly what the opposition is stating. They're saying that if Vice Prime Minister Choi Sang-mok, who is the acting president now, if he does not appoint the three additional constitutional judges, that they are going to impeach him as well. But this is easier said than done. This is like the 30th impeachment attempt that the opposition is attempting, and even the people in the middle will be thinking, I mean, enough is enough. So it won't be easy for them politically to do that, and it would not be wise. But the biggest issue is the economy and the social stability. There must be a political solution to this, compromising, talking. And that's where that's what we don't see right now.
Youngshik, you have a system, it seems, with lots of checks and balances. The problem is that those checks and balances right now seem to be leading to deadlock and paralysis. Just explain to us simply, how do you get to fresh elections in the Korean system?
Well, the situation may not be as bad as described by many observers. The checks and balance system is definitely working, although the system appears to be in chaos. One, the National Assembly passed a bill to impeach the president. Now the ball is in the court, in the hands of the judges, 6 judges in the Constitutional Court. So this is a peaceful and legal process according to the constitutional process. And now we have 6 judges out of 9, and 2 of them are scheduled to retire in the month of April. So as long as 6 judges will produce the verdict, whether President Yonsei will be impeached or reinstated before the retirement of the 2 judges, then the requirement of the 2/3 majority in the Constitutional Court to make the decision on the impeachment of the president will be satisfied. So the timeline is not that dire. But the better scenario would be having full bench with all 9 judges in the Constitutional Court, and 9 judges will render the verdict on the case of the impeachment of the President Yoon Suk-yeol. So things are moving forward despite all these, partisan struggles, delaying tactics, President Yoon Suk-yeol trying to buy time. But the opposition party is so strongly backed by public opinion. At least 75% of the South Korean public is in favor of the impeaching, see the result, concrete result about the impeachment of the President Yoon Suk-yeol. And the Supreme Court and the Constitutional Court actually made the authoritative decision that acting president can exercise the right on behalf of the impeached president to appoint the remaining 3 judges. So when you combine the opinions rendered by the Supreme Court and Constitutional Court and the public opinion, then the Choi Sang-mok or any other acting president will be eventually making the decision.
Jeeyang, I ask you now about how this is viewed. I mean, you're not currently in Korea, you're there in the US. How is this viewed by the rest of the world? Because South Korea was seen by everyone as this great success story. It has such industry and manufacturing. It also has vibrant popular culture. Everyone around the world knows K-pop. Do you think this is a real blow to the country's reputation and prestige?
I don't necessarily think so. You're right to say that it did catch the world by surprise, in part because Korea, since its democratization, has been, moving forward very strongly towards rule of law and, inclusive participation. We had a record historic voter turnout in the last general elections in April. But I think, certainly not speaking for everyone in this side of the ocean, but I do think there is a point to be made about, what perhaps specialists do not see, or for Koreans living there, there is a sort of very much a historic context, right? Of course. And that is not always reported or perhaps as well known. So things that my fellow panelists have already mentioned about the sort of, the institutions entrenched in its sort of, geopolitical setting, aftermath of the Korean War, the Cold War, and so on. The parties, because the democratic institutions were there, they developed over time, several decades up to the present point. So yes, there are checks and balances, but perhaps this latest event is an opportunity, a moment of quote unquote crisis, to perhaps, discuss and build consensus on how do we avoid this happening in the future, to the extent that it is structural and speaks to perhaps some institutional reforms, which isn't a new discussion by any stretch of the imagination.
General Chun, your country is the fourth largest economy in Asia. How worried should we be about the economic fallout? The currency, the won, has gone to its lowest level against the dollar since 2009. And of course, there's something else on the horizon, which is the return of President Trump. And he is warning that there will be tariffs imposed.
Yeah, so I guess beside the whole process of impeachment or no impeachment, or whatever the political turmoil is going to be, is about the economy and how this whole political situation is affecting the economy. Right now, as you point out, the won rate is in trouble, which is affecting trade, which is affecting investment, all sectors of Korean economy. And of course, as you mentioned, we have a new administration in the United States, which is again going to challenge Korea. But that's why we need to resolve this issue as soon as possible. But it looks like for the next at least 3 to 6 months, we're going to live in this kind of state. But I feel that the Korean people are strong enough to be able to overcome this. We'll have a hard time, but I believe we'll be able to endure. And the United States, the Trump administration, despite the tariffs and whatever economic developments might occur, in the end, I think that the South Korea will be able to work out a mutual deal where both countries will benefit.
Youngshik, it's not just the tariffs, of course, is it? We have to go back to last time when President Trump was in the White House. At one point, he was threatening to charge South Korea $10 billion a year to keep US troops in the country. There are about 28,000 US troops there. I mean, how worried should the authorities be in Seoul about not having a permanent leader at this time, which one would think is a pretty vital time for diplomacy and outreach?
Yeah, there's no question this is a very vital time for South Korean diplomacy in conjunction with the return of Donald Trump for his second term. But it is very coincidental that when President Trump was the first time elected in 2017, we also went through a very difficult time with a case of impeachment of President Park Geun-hye. So there was no president, Park Geun-hye, in the president's office, but she was suspended, and the presidential authority was replaced and exercised by acting president Hwang Kyo-hwan. So this is not such a foreign territory for South Korean government or its citizens dealing with a very hardline U.S. administration with Donald Trump as a president. This is the second time. But at the same time, we know what kind of foreign policy and trade pressure would be coming from Washington with the inauguration of Donald Trump, even without this political chaos created by the declaration of martial law. So there is an element of preparation and readiness on the South Korean side. So we know what we were going to get with Donald Trump coming back to the White House. And the geopolitical significance of South Korea cannot be discounted because a major target of Trump diplomacy remains the same. It's China. So in the context of the Trump administration, try to pressure and contain China, then South Korea will remain as a very vital and important element to Trump administration of the United States, despite all these political turmoils and weaknesses in the South Korean government.
Jeeyang, I mean, we still have... Sorry, General Chun, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may just add to that. Although very few South Koreans dare say this in public, I must remind everyone that there is still a significant number of South Koreans who are more than willing to share more for the cost of American soldiers on the Korean Peninsula, because we feel that the benefits that come from this military alliance, which creates stability for Korea and Northeast Asia, is, to be frank with you, priceless. So I just want to add that.
Jeeyang, on that subject, of course, those troops are there because of the threat from North Korea. How do you think the developments in South Korea are going to be seen in Pyongyang? And, of course, they've got the return of Donald Trump. And there was a real seesaw in what happened last time he was president. At the UN General Assembly at the beginning of his term, he said there was a possibility for him to possibly totally destroy North Korea. And then he went through those series of 2 summits and a visit actually briefly into North Korea, and then diplomacy that completely petered out by the end of his term. How confused do you think they'll be in Pyongyang about the developments at the moment?
I'm not sure I would characterize North Korea's position vis-a-vis the peninsula and its neighboring countries as being confused. I think they're watching. There's certainly Kim Jong-un has come out and condemned President Yoon's martial law, but I think you have to sort of step back and look at history again. And, I think his time has also at a different moment, right, than we were, say, even in the 80s. So, all the things that we've been discussing about bilateral, trilateral alliance and all these things that I think under Yoon's administration, the foreign policy has very much been engaged with the world, right? Economically, security-wise, so on, democratic ally. These things are, I think, what could potentially, let's say there is a snap election after the ruling is handed down from this constitutional court, that we could be, depending on who's in power, either with Lee Jae-myung, if he is in fact the leader, or a conservative, or even a President Yoon, right? Under the Conservative Party, these sort of status quo policies that keep South Korea engaged with the world could potentially regress or completely go the other direction. So I think that's the kind of thing that we know could happen based, again, on historical positions and so on by either parties. But I think the real question and the potential threat, in a more comprehensive use of the word, is again, South Korea's engagement with the world. And as you said at the outset, it's, international significance.
Youngshik, I need to
if
raise
I
two
may.
other. Yeah, Youngshik, I need to move us on if you don't mind, because we've not mentioned two other key significant players in this region, Japan and China. Under President Yoon, relations with Japan, I think, got a little bit better. How do you think they will be viewing the developments that we've seen recently?
Well, Japan must be really disappointed to see the downfall of President Yoon Suk-yeol, because under his leadership, the bilateral partnership between Seoul and Tokyo has been improving drastically. The improvement was really vivid and strong on the front of the trilateral secure cooperation among U.S., South Korea, and Japan to deal with the growing threats from North Korea armed with missiles and nuclear bombs. So seeing Yoon Suk-yeol going down would be really shocking to Japan. But that also shows the very fragile aspects of the security cooperation between Seoul and Tokyo in essence. So Japan's approach to South Korea, especially for the cultivation of security partnership, despite historical and territorial disputes, will be more transactional.
Okay, can I push you on now to very quickly to China, and we could do a whole program on this, but very quickly on China, please.
Sure. And the downfall of Yoon Suk-yeol may be a boon for the next administration of South Korea, because China will definitely try to make full advantage of the potential oust of the Yoon Suk-yeol, who has been really anti-Chinese in the overall foreign policy orientation. So what I'm saying is that despite this political turmoil and difficult economic difficulties, the political situation may open a door for South Korea to cultivate new venues in the realm of foreign relations, especially its approach to China. So there are some positive aspects to be gained from such a difficult time in South Korea.
General Chun, if I can end with you, there are all sorts of problems in the region. Your country, technically, it's an armistice, still at war with North Korea. How worried are you about this political situation, briefly?
I think North Korea is smart enough to know that any kind of provocation at this time would only unite the Korean people, as well as strengthen the ROC and U.S. alliance, as well as the Japanese relationship. So right now, they're being very shrewd. They're taking their time. They're using this as a propaganda issue. And for the time being, I think they'll be at that stage. Another point is that the majority of the military is quite focused on defending the nation. So I'm not that worried at all.
Okay, well, thank you very much to our guests today, Youngshik, Bong, Jeeyang, Rhee, Baum and Chun. If you came in midway through the show, don't worry, you can always see this programme again anytime you want at aljazeera.com. Your thoughts and suggestions are welcome too. As ever, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or you can find us on X. Look for @AJ Inside Story. I'll be back in this chair very soon. Until then, from me, James Bays, and the team here in Doha, stay safe. Bye-bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.